spoilers ahead. Smile is a 2022 horror thriller starring Saucy Bacon, Jesse T. Usher, and Kyle Gallner, whose face makes me sad every time I have to watch it.
Some people thought Smile was a tense, slow burn with a compelling payoff, while other people thought it felt like it was written by a committee made up of inept individuals. Not bad. Let's take a look at Smile.
The plot. The movie opens in a psychiatric ward. We meet Rose Cotter, who's an overworked, underappreciated psychiatrist. Rose is talking to Laura Weaver, who just watched her art history professor commit suicide a few days earlier. Laura says she's being followed around by smiling people that tell her she's going to die. Then Laura screams hysterically and has a hissy fit right there on the floor. While Dr. Rose is calling for help, she watches Laura stand up and smile before she kills herself with a big chunk of broken vase. And if Laura smiled and killed herself in front of me in my office, I'd have been all like,
Whoa. Laura, I get it. You're having an off day. It happens to all of us. It feels like everybody I speak to in this place is having an off day, but that's not the point. The point is, I paid full price for that vase you knocked over, which is not a huge deal because I am on a doctor's salary, but have you any idea how difficult it is to match things to rooms in hospitals without using beige? Seriously? Gross!
Then the police interviewed Dr. Rose to get her thoughts on what just happened. And if the police interviewed me to get my thoughts on what just happened, I'd have been all like,
So, we're looking for anything that might make some sense of all this. If there's anything else you can tell us that might help.
Thank you. I've been trying to make sense of it myself. Like I was trying to tell Laura before. I paid full price for that vase. And then Amazon put it on sale for like a third of the price, like 3 days later. So at first I was fine paying full price because it looked nice and it had that eggshell blue color, which to me has always just been a light blue. But of course, when the color has a fancy name, the vase becomes fancy by association, right? But then you get to thinking, like, is it actually even nice at all when other people are buying it for like $9?
I think we're just trying to get your opinion of her mental state.
And like $9 for something that's not even like hand done by some tribal kid somewhere in a jungle we're protecting and simultaneously extracting resources from seems pretty frickin' cheap to me. What?
her other patient's named Karl, and he's smiling and telling her she's gonna die too. And when her boss, Dr. Kumar, says she's starting to look like a dead body, he gives her a week off to get her shit together. Things go from bad to worse pretty quickly for Rose. Her fiancé Trevor and her sister Holly start worrying about her behavior, which doesn't sound like a fun week off at all. Then at her nephew's birthday party, Rose's present somehow ends up being her dead cat. And I actually thought that was hilarious, but everyone else was horrified by the gift, so I know I wouldn't have enjoyed that party anyways. A second later, Rose sees one of the party guests grinning at her, so she swears her head off and crashes into a glass table, showing everybody she really does know how to party. After the party, she goes to visit her own therapist, Dr. Madeline Northcott. And Madeline does what therapists do by telling her she's all stressed out from her abusive, mentally ill mother who overdosed right in front of her when she was a child. Why do psychiatrists always fall back on the childhood stuff? Because there's no billing code set up in their systems for demonic entities. When Rose realizes Laura's professor was grinning at her before he died, she goes to visit his widow, Nurse Carla Espinoza. She learns her dead husband was affected after watching another woman die by suicide. So Rose asks her mopey-faced ex-boyfriend Joel, who's conveniently a police detective, to go through the police records. And they find a bunch of cases of somebody witnessing a suicide, then a few days later, them committing suicide themselves in front of another person, creating a pattern. And isn't mopey-faced Joe's police work incredible? The police in my neighborhood can't even get the Rose visits Sister Holly to try and apologize for the old dead cat thing, but the damage has already been done. While Rose is upset in the car, her sister comes down to give her a heads up about an upcoming family event. Sorry, heads down. Mopey-faced Joel calls her to crank up the ticking clock element by telling her all of the suicides occur within a week, and the only exception to the rule was a guy called Robert, who murdered somebody else instead. He's still alive. So they go to visit him in jail. He says the only way to survive is to kill somebody in front of a witness, and you have to do it in a properly brutal fashion because the entity gets off on the trauma. But Rose isn't up for that, so she splits and bumps into Madeline, who isn't really Madeline, and not Madeline tells her it's almost time. So Rose speeds off to the hospital with a big old knife and a head full of bad intentions, and she kills Karl in front of Dr. Kumar to pass the curse on to him. But not really, as it was just another hallucination. When she snaps out of it, Dr. Kumar is actually at her window, and he sees the big old knife, and he calls the police. So Rose drives off to her old abandoned family home where she tries to deprive the entity of potential witnesses by confronting it in the form of her dead mother. And this makes Smile's entity unique in the sense that it allows its victims to orchestrate its scenes in a horror movie. While Rose is there, we learn she found her mother after she overdosed, and she chose to do nothing about it. So Rose sets her mother, who's not really her mother, on fire and leaves the house to burn down behind her. She heads off to mopey-faced Joel's house. When she gets there, he's all mopey-faced, but not really. I mean, he's still mopey-faced, but everything that just happened in the house was also another hallucination. So the entity reveals its true, gross self and forces itself inside of Rose's body. But not like that. Then the real, actual mopey-faced Joel shows up to save her, but Rose gives him the goodbye smile before she sets herself on fire, meaning mopey-faced Joel's cursed now, which was a genius move on Rose's part. Passing it on to him means the curse is ended, because mopey-faced Joel finds it fucking impossible to smile in the movies he stars in. Hands down, for me, the best aspect of Smile is its atmosphere. There's not a single minute in this movie that isn't dreadful and grim. There's no levity or lighthearted banter, and while that can choke a movie if it's done poorly, it really works here. And that grim atmosphere serves as the perfect backdrop to Saucy Bacon's acting. She's sensitive and susceptible and weak and frantic to the extent that she sells us the unreliable narrator perfectly. A movie like this wouldn't work with somebody unwilling to go there, and Bacon definitely did. If you've been a fan of scary movies in the last 10 years, you'll be well acquainted with the idea of horror movies as metaphors for grief and trauma. There have been loads of them in the last decade, and some of them have been brilliant, like Possum, The Lodge, Hereditary, Get Out, The Ritual, Shutter Island, and The Babadook, just to name a few. Each of these movies find that narrow space between reality and fantasy and steers the story right down the middle of it from start to finish. We can't tell if Rose is cursed or just suffering from trauma caused by her mother's death. And it takes a lot of coordination between writers and producers and directors and actors to keep that balance. So hats off to them for pulling it off. Having said that, the shite bits. If I was to list all these recent trauma metaphors from best to worst in terms of execution, this movie would be at the bottom of the list. Smile's based on an 11-minute short film that won an award at South by Southwest in 2020. Instead of putting the time and effort into really fleshing out a full movie from the limited source material, it feels like they just slapped a bunch of other movie themes together to fill in the missing screen time, which is a real shame, given how well the other elements were executed. Instead of creating an original twist on an established formula, it comes off feeling like a bit of a wannabe instead. The verdict. So, should you watch Smile if you haven't seen it? Or should you keep your eyes on the ground and move safely on to the next novelty in horror movies?
Yes, it's definitely watchable. Now, if you'd asked me the same question 5 years ago, I'd probably have hummed and hawed, but given the state of things in horror recently, I am going to say Smile is definitely worth a couple of hours of your time. Until next time, folks! It's me, Johnny, from that thing you just watched. If you enjoyed it, go down there and smash me in the face to subscribe. And if you want to watch another thing, there's one right there. Do it!